Well, thank you so much, Janet, for your introduction and Tony for your opening remarks. I am thrilled to be here at your site conference talking to you about my research program on resiliency. And I love this idea about a comeback. So let me tell you what I know about resiliency, share with you some of these research informed practices, and even squeeze in a few tools for us to be thinking about. So the first thing that you're going to see is my contact information on this slide. So we'll make sure to post that for you. Feel free to reach out. I welcome your questions. As well, on my website, there's free open source material, which means you're welcome to borrow it, share it, pass it on. I welcome those conversations to continue. I do just want to make a little pause and let you know that I'm joining you today from Peterborough, Ontario, and the land in which I live upon and the land in which I'm joining you from is land of the Anishinaabe First Persons of the Mississauga. And I'm a settler in this space, and I recognize that people are joining us today from all around the world, and I'm so honored to be here, and I celebrate that we can form community even in a digital landscape. So the way to get started is an exercise that we call noting. So in psychology, what noting means is that we kind of pause and think about what's top of mind right now. What's top of mind for me as I've been navigating this kind of whole thing that is 2020 is actually a quote by C.S. Lewis. Now, some folks know him as the person who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, but he also wrote about the human condition. And what Lewis said is this: it's not the load that's going to break you, it's how you carry it. And what I'm going to talk to you about today are some strategies to think about how we can carry this. Now, the most common response I hear from persons is they tell me that life feels hard right now, that they're feeling like there's so much uncertainty. We're being challenged and really, really pushed to the limit right now in our sectors, in our businesses, and even in our personal lives. But I just want to remind you, life is hard, but it's not because you're doing it wrong. It's complex because we're navigating what we call wicked problems, big, complicated issues that don't have clear solutions. We're navigating a health issue. We're navigating, a needed racial reckoning. There's political uncertainty. I get it. It's hard, but it's not because you're doing it wrong. Now, when we think about this idea of resiliency, this essentially is the comeback. How do people bounce back when they've experienced adversity or challenge? My research team and I have identified that there's 5 core competencies or traits that we see in people who are resilient. And I'm going to walk you through how we landed on each one of these. The first one is a sense of belonging. It is absolutely crucial that you have a home team, that you have someone in your corner who's going to look out for you. And we want to make sure we're protecting our home team, because if we're not careful, we can actually take the brunt of our work stress out on the people who matter most. So we really want to protect our home team. The second piece we talk about is perspective, and how do we stay focused? How do we keep our head in the game, so to speak, stay motivated when we're in such unsettled times? It's as if there's a lot of turbulence right now, and we're really not sure what the next right move is. But perspective means that we continue and do the best we can with the knowledge and the tools that we have. The third variable we talk about in my program is the role of acceptance. And we refer to this as deciphering your controllables. And what I really invite you to think about is, how do you make sure you put your energy and your resources and your focus into those things that matter most, into the things that you can have control over? Now, the fourth variable we talk about in my work is the role of hope, or choosing to be hope filled. Now, I'll tell you a quick little story about how we landed here. I had done some work with our Canadian military, and I was working with a group of soldiers who just came home from a deployment. And I was really curious about, what do they do on their next day off? What do they do when they actually have a day to themselves after such a long time overseas? The first soldier shared with me that before his deployment, he had actually painted his kitchen, but he only got half done. So that's what he was looking forward to. The second soldier shared with me that they had laid down hardwood floor, but they only got half done. So that was the project that they were going to work on. Everyone I spoke to in that platoon all had half finished house projects, what I thought was quite peculiar. So I asked their lieutenant, I said, "Sir, what's that all about?" And what he said was transformational. He said, "Doc, they leave those as signs of hope for their families that they're coming back. It gives their family a visible marker, and it gives them something to visualize and to focus on." I asked that lieutenant next, I said, "Sir, if that's the case, then hope is a choice." And he said, "Robyne, hope is a choice, that we need to choose every single day to be of service to others. So when we think about your personal resiliency that you're going to need to get through this longer season of uncertainty, I implore you to consider choosing to be hope filled, protect the morale of the people around you. Now, the fifth variable we talk about is hope. And when we think about that, it ties into the next one, which is humor, which means we still have to have pockets of joy and fun and laughter. What we know here, the science demonstrates, is that, for example, when you laugh, your body releases a natural tranquilizer. So for that moment in time, your pain receptors are blocked, which means it gives you that chance to keep going, to be able to persist. So my invitation for you is to think about, how do these five variables work together to create a constellation of your baseline for where you need to tap into and lean into when those are those big moments of uncertainty. Now, I wanted to talk just a wee bit about some of those barriers, what gets in the way. And what we see here, the biggest barrier to resiliency is stress. So what I'm showing you here is a diagram that's called the Yerke-Dodson Human Performance Stress Curve. Now, this isn't new, all right? This has been around since 1908. But what this demonstrates for us is that when we have stress, it actually inhibits our behavior. And in some cases, it might actually improve it. But often it also could actually decrease our behavior in terms of the behaviors that we want to do. So let me tell you what I mean here. If you think about stress as cortisol and adrenaline in your bloodstream, and if you didn't have any or it was very low, what we know is that you wouldn't be very good at your job. You wouldn't be very good at getting things done. But as your stress levels start to rise, we actually know you can hit what we call optimal performance. This is when you feel good. Now, this is when you're energized. This is when you're on your A game. This is where you want to be. But if you get too much stress, too much uncertainty, too many things outside of your control, what we see is persons actually start to have a decrease in their performance. They actually feel fatigued and exhausted. Why I don't want you to get stuck here especially is because this is where you don't feel like yourself. This is where, we see empathy decreases, compassion decreases. We really get stuck. We don't want folks to get stuck here. But thankfully, we know that there's three ways we can get you unstuck. And this is based on Dr. McGonigal's research. Number one, the way we get rid of you getting stuck here is actually through motion. I want you to get up and move around. Having our blood circulating is really important to metabolize stress. Number two, that we talk about in my program is the fact that crying is a way to get rid of it. And what we talk about that is it's called a cortisol cry. It's like when you get red and blotchy and a little bit snotty and slobbery. Those are so cathartic. They're great for us to just feel a release. Now, the third way we can get you unstuck is actually through eating carbohydrates. We eat all those delicious, yummy things. And what we know is that that behavior really serves us. It actually helps break down our stress. So when we think about it, we know that it's really important to activate our soothing system. We have to actually look after ourselves to be able to continue to persist. Now, there's a lot of rules in our cultures about what we should be doing or ought to be doing, but the reality is you can't hate yourself healthy. We need to really visit this in a way that's positive and it's supportive. And how we do it is by activating our emotional regulation system of our soothing system. That's when we can kind of take a deep breath, quiet that alarm that's going off in our threat system, move away from always having to get things done right now in that crisis mode, and just start to feel that sense of wonder, that sense of calm, that sense of being able to be okay. Now, how we do that is actually through the practice of cultivating life with work balance. And I appreciate your industry, you're movers, you get things done, you're high performers, but we got to make sure we're looking after you. Now, I think there's a bit of a myth that we should address when it comes to this point, and that's the idea that a lot of folks talk about it as work-life balance. To me, that's backwards. You be okay, and then you're going to continue to do the good work. If you're not okay, it's even harder to do that good work. Now, what I want to show you here is some of my best research-informed practices on how we can cultivate life with work balance. Point number one, monotasking versus multitasking. I invite you to be a group of monotaskers at least once during the course of the day. The reality is most of us are multitaskers and we always have lots of things on the go. But quiet, your mind and just focus sometimes on an activity that has less distractions. Minimize the screens, minimize all of the noise, and just focus on having that one thing in front of you. When you monotask, it actually activates your soothing system. Number two, I invite you to think about your transition practices. A lot of us, we don't have commutes the same way anymore. We're not having some of those ways that we transition from work and life and things that matter. And what's happening is our boundaries are getting blurred. It's really important we know how to change gears. Another tip I like to do when I'm working with high executives is we talk about creating effort into our new habits. The reality is we waste way too much energy trying to correct our bad behavior. We're not very good at that. So I would invite you not to get stuck there. Now, the last suggestion I would offer you here is make sure you have an end point. At some point, your workday has to come to an end. You have to unwind. You have to disconnect. So then that way you kind of slow down to hurry back up and you continue to do that good work. Now, when we think about this, one of the things I would invite you to think about is how do we cultivate that feeling of wellness, which is crucial for human resiliency. Now, my number one tip for you around wellness, it's not all or nothing. It's not something that you're 100% well or you're 100% off the rails. Wellness is this deep, cultivated relationship you have with your sense of self. It's this idea emotionally and physically and spiritually, you're in alignment. I also let folks know right now it's dangerous to go into debt with your own self-care. You don't want to deplete the resources because you're going to need them. You're going to have something left in the tank. So that leads into this argument that self-care, it is not optional. We have to make sure that you are okay, and you are okay. This comeback that we're all in as a community, we have to make sure that we're doing the best we can. And I know you are doing that, but you got to give yourself patience and kindness because that's what's going to matter most. Now, here are 3 quick practices that I invite you to think about on how to cultivate wellness. The first one is called bookending your day. So when I look at people who really are figuring out how to stick handle and navigate lots of big seasons of uncertainty, this is the practice that we use. Protect the first hour of your day, and then I want you to protect the last hour of your day. The first hour of the day, I want you to fill it up with easy wins, things that make you feel accomplished, active, alert, things that really make you feel supercharged. Now, I want you to think about closing that last hour of your day in a place of wholeness and restoration and renewal and reflection so you can welcome sleep. Bookending your day is a great way to foster and cultivate balance. The second strategy, and this is a gem, this is one I've been using with people all around the world. It's this idea, start your day with a day map. And I want you to take a piece of paper and divide it into 3 columns, or you can use this on a device if that's more your thing. Column number 1 is your to-do list. What is it that you have to get done? I do invite you to think about maybe 5 items. So many people put like 20 things on their to-do list and then they get like to-do list paralysis and you do nothing or you get really overwhelmed. So 5 is plenty, key deliverables you want to achieve. Number 2, column number 2, I want you to have your to-be list. How do you want to feel today? How do you want to be? I know for me on the top of my to-be list with 3 teenagers at home, I need to be patient. I also need to be present. Column number 3 is your not to-do list. What are the things you don't want to do today? Where are the places you don't want to get stuck? For me, on my not to-do list is this idea, I'm not doom scrolling. Doom scrolling is when I've been working at my computer all day. I need a break, but instead of getting up and moving around, I pick up my device and read news stories that make me sad. That's numbing behavior. That's procrastinating behavior. It doesn't serve me. So no doom scrolling's on my not to-do list. The last suggestion here is this idea about connecting with nature. We know that nature is a gift. She is a teacher of resiliency. When you go outside, your body experiences abundance. Your body feels an increase in productivity, problem solving, innovation, this idea of possible. When you're inside all day, you feel shortage, you feel scarcity. So we know connecting with nature is so important. And even as the seasons change, we got to find ways to be outside. It's so important for us to recalibrate. Now, the last idea I wish to share with you is this practice of focusing. And this focusing practice is something that I call lighthouses. Now, I have the deepest affinity to the lighthouses. I loved on the video earlier, we were celebrating Prince Edward Island because that place is extra special in my heart. Why is it? Let me tell you real quick. So my family came to Canada from Scotland, and my family immigrated. And when they were coming across, they came across the transatlantic voyage. And my grandfather had his wee little family with him, feeling very anxious. There were so many storms on the ocean. And it wasn't until he saw the lighthouse in Prince Edward Island that they knew that they were going to be okay. He knew he was safe. That lighthouse signified hope. So my invitation for you is, what can you put top of mind in the next kind of season as we're moving forward that's going to help you stay hope filled? That's going to help you make what matters most matter most. Now, I'm going to tell you a quick little story about what I use as my lighthouse. And my lighthouse is something that I use as a sentence. It's called, I can do hard things. Now, I grew up with a mama since I was a little girl that said, Robyne can do hard things. And I had no idea what she meant until I was 16. By the time I went into my 16th season, I was a very hurting young woman. I had dropped out of high school. I was navigating an addiction. I was navigating a mental health challenge. My world was just crumbling. My parents loved me so hard, but helplessly. They couldn't get me back on track. But then one night, I was driving home late at night by myself. I was 16 years old. I had my driver's license for 1 week, and we lived in northern Canada. And I was driving home. A snowstorm rolled in quickly. I lost control of my car. My car went off an embankment, and my car crashed through the ice, and it sank in the Otonabee River. I was trapped inside a vehicle, submerged under ice and water. Within seconds, my car was completely filled. And I remember not actually feeling scared in that moment. I was feeling angry that I could not protect my mother from what was about to happen, that her daughter was going to drown in a car accident, and I couldn't save my mom from that experience. And when I started to think about my mama, it was as if it was like this emotional echo that rang through my bones that said, but Robyne does hard things. And in that moment, I made the decision to try to survive. I remember I had my winter boots on, I had my winter coat on. The water pressure was so great, I couldn't even get my seatbelt off. I had to wiggle out through the seatbelt. I got into the cavity of the car, and I had nothing to break those windows with. I had to break the windows with my hands. I recall swimming through the broken glass, and I had no idea which way was up or down. They estimate my vehicle was between 15 and 20 feet underwater. And I realized the only way I could get my bearings was if I let go of my breath that I'd been holding, because I knew my bubbles would rise. And I remember swimming after those bubbles as fast as I could. Next thing I remember feeling was this like ripping pain on my face, this sheer hot pain. And it was actually my face hitting the ice because the ice was frozen over. My car had broke a hole in it, but I'd gone farther down the channel. I remember swimming deeper into the darkness, deeper into the unknown, until finally I got to a place where I get my torso onto an ice shield. Now that night, there was a man by the name of Joseph Todd, just a random guy in his 30s driving home from work. Joseph saw my car tracks go off in the snow off the road. He drove all along the side to see if he could see anyone. Joseph saw my body in the dark out on the ice, and he crawled out on the ice. He brought a chain, wrapped it around me, and dragged me to shore. Joseph Todd was awarded the Governor General's Award for Bravery that night for saving a stranger. And when I woke up in the hospital, my mother was there. And the first thing she said to me was, Robbie, how did you survive that? And I looked at her and I said, Mama, you told me I could do hard things. And she said, dear Lord, that is not what we ever talked about. But what I learned that night was the origin story to why I study resiliency, because I do believe in the human condition. I do believe in a comeback. Now, I do always want to acknowledge Joseph, because I don't think any act of bravery like that should ever be forgotten. And I give him thanks for the learnings and what was available to me that night and what has since been able to unfold in terms of my research. Now, the last thing that I want to leave you with before we go to question and answer is this idea about knowing your resilient markers. What's going to make the difference for you when things get difficult? We know this season ahead of us, it's going to be complicated. It's going to be a roller coaster, ups and downs and uncertain moments. But these are 4 sentences that I think can help you stay on point, help you practice the resiliency that you need. Finish these sentences. And what I know as a researcher and a behaviorist, if you don't do this in the next 24 hours, you're not likely going to do it. So please take a few moments to put some energy here. Number 1, I have. Who's in your corner that you either have to protect or that will protect you no matter what? I have. Number 2, I am. I want you to speak healthy confidence over your life. I am capable. I am problem solving. I am resilient. What I hear so often is people say, Robyne, I am tired. I am overwhelmed. I'm exhausted. Whatever you say after the words I am, I think that's what you're going to feel. So speak strength and encouragement over your life. Number three, I can do hard things. Obviously, I'm biased. That's my big sentence. But I also know I can figure things out. I can problem solve. I also know that I can ask for help. There is no shame for asking for help if the weight of the world becomes too heavy for your two hands. And the last one, I will. This is your personal call to action. What are you going to do? What's your next right step to make sure you can continue to practice the everyday resiliency that is deep within you? It's in there. You just have to invite it. You have to hold on tight and you have to keep going. It's okay to rest, but we will not quit. We will find a way to make the next right move. So thank you. Merci, Miigwech. I'm so excited to be joined by Tony. And let's get to questions, Tony. I'm happy to hear what people are thinking about.
Robyne, it's such a pleasure. First of all, I'm a massive fan of yours. And what I really admire is you're as strong through a screen as you are on a stage. It's a rare skill. And that's just your passion that comes through. And I think passion is so important. So I just want to thank you for being with us today and taking the time. My first question comes to you is Maslow, hierarchy of needs. He talked about that we have to get through sort of safety and security before we can feel that we have the right to love and belong, and then maybe even go after a pursuit and purpose, and then self-actualization. How do we get people who are feeling that they're pushed back on their back feet with this negative energy of news and media to feel that we are still secure and we do have every right to feel the way that you're suggesting we feel?
100%. What a great question. And thank you. You honor me with your praise. I accept that. Very, very kind of you. I think what happens is we really have to live aligned with our values. It's one of those things where there's so much noise, there's so much pressure, but as long as you stay within that sphere of your value system and you make what matters most matter most, that's where you can cultivate a deep sense of security. You can trust yourself. You can trust that you're going to always put your feet where they need to be. So that way you can continue to have those positive outlooks, that you can continue to have things to look forward to keep working. And it's not to dismiss that we know COVID has really walloped a lot of people. People are feeling really wobbly, but we also know that we're finding a strength within ourselves that maybe we needed to be reminded of.
What advice can you give based on that for SITE? Because this is an organization that's really trying to promote this comeback journey. And part of this comeback journey is to remind people that what we do for a living is a lot of what you're telling. We help in our events to make people feel more mindful, to make people feel they have a higher purpose. A lot of the things that you've checked off in your box is really why people invest in our industry. So my question is, what can SITE Canada and SITE Worldwide do to advance some of the things that you're talking about so that people start rethinking that, hey, we've got to get back to making sure we're investing in our culture, much like what you talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So what's really important is that people need things to look forward to. And that's really where I think that SITE Canada and SITE World is so well positioned to be able to help people orchestrate the comeback. Because when people have things they look forward to, it helps them have that sense of inspiration, that thing that we're working towards. Those little goals, they're so important. But when they're also like that deep connected goal, those are soul goals. Those feed us. So I think where SITE Canada really can have a big impact right now is helping organizations understand we have to cultivate things to look forward to. And you are so well positioned to do that work.
So I went to your website, which is just packed with incredible content. And I'm going to draw on two pieces that you talked about and ask you to put them together. First one said, well, you had this content that said, I think it was, we will be okay. We are okay. Yeah. And then another piece said, but it doesn't have to be all or nothing. So combine those two in terms of how do I feel better about that we are okay, and know that there'll be times in the day where I'm going to get pushed back and it's okay to feel that way. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And what I think about resiliency is so quickly defined as like bouncing back or navigating kind of difficult situations. But when I think about resiliency, it's really that idea of being so in tuned with yourself that you operate from a place that no matter what, come what may, I will be okay. Like that is that kind of deep rooted sense that I want you to have in your head and your heart. Now, what I think about is the fact that also with attunement, you're going to know when you have lots of energy and you're high flying, you can get those key deliverables, you can tackle your goals, you can be wildly ambitious, and you'll feel really productive. And also within the same day, even, you might feel wobbly and you might feel a little bit unsteady and there's a lot of unknown. So what happens there is you have to understand, how do you meet yourself when you're in those different phases? And what I think about resiliency and our temperaments is that we're not ever supposed to be all of one thing. It's not like resiliency makes us bulletproof. What it does is it lets me know myself well enough that, whoa, today I have to walk gently because I'm feeling a little bit sensitive and vulnerable. And maybe the next day I'm feeling ambitious and confident. And it's honoring the fact that those feelings, Tony, can coexist. I can still be scared and resilient. I can still be anxious and still be resilient. Those things are not mutually exclusive. And again, it's cultivating that, really honoring the fact that you are a professional, but you're also a person of value. You're somebody who has worthiness that is not dependent on our productivity. It always is there. It always exists. And we live in a culture that very much says it's something that has to be achieved. Everybody has to be faster, smarter, richer, healthier. But really, we actually have to be okay and really foster that sense that, again, come what may, I will be okay. It's going to help us to handle all of those bumps and bruises.
So a lot of the people that are listening today are responsible for others, whether they employ them or they're suppliers that they've worked with in the past. And when COVID hits, it's not just about how I feel. There's a lot of guilt that comes in with how the people that used to depend on me feel, especially if they're employees and you know their names and their families' names and their kids. On your site, you talk about the importance of letting go of guilt. Can you share what that means in reference to small business owners and the people that depend on them?
Yeah. And again, this ties back to the fact, as long as we're operating out of our values, if you're operating out of your values and whatever those are to you, everyone's going to have a different constellation of their value sets. But it's honoring the fact that you're making your decisions and it's for the right reasons, right? So sometimes there'll be difficult decisions. They're going to be challenging. And we do carry the weight of the world of the people who are in our charge. But what we have to come back to is the fact that we do the best we can with the tools we have. If we operate from our moral compass that's in line with our values, we still will feel that difficulty. We'll feel that uncomfortable or even that distress. But ultimately, at the end of the day, when you sign off, you know that you're doing it for the right reasons and that your intentions are good. And I think that's where, if we can operate from that system, the guilt, again, it's a wave, right? It's gonna come and it's gonna go. But if you can ask yourself, did I do it for the right reasons? Am I operating out of my value systems? Then at the end of the day, that guilt is a tax that you've already paid.
I learned a long time ago that your upbringing is very much what you can draw on in your knapsack. You talked about the path you were following at a young age, and it was leading you down to dropping out of school, addiction to drugs. An incredible story of somebody that really reached out and helped you. What advice can you give people that are so focused on the future and making things happen to make sure that they never lose those lessons that they've brought with them to this point in their life?
Yeah, well, I think that what's so important is that we become authors of our own story. And when we look back on our past, so many people are stuck with stigma. So many people are stuck with regret and judgment. My invitation for you, as somebody who carried the very heavy labels of stigma and regret, is the idea that I need to understand it's part of my story. That's part of my story. And when I embraced it, I actually found that those things can coexist. I now like to think back on my upbringing and with fondness, realizing like, yeah, I made some choices, but I also had some pretty great experience as well that brought me to where I am. And I think ultimately what we want to do is cultivate present day awareness. When you're in the moment, realizing all of the things that we could be thankful for, practicing gratitude, it keeps us present. So we're not on autopilot. We show up and know how to make what matters most matter most.
Robyne, speaking of what matters most, you certainly matter to this audience. I learned a lot about, I love being true to your values. I love those questions to answer yourself. More than anything else I learned is put yourself first in terms of your mindfulness and your health. How do we get hold of you? And so that the people listening, if they If they're smart enough, they'll invite you to their next conference. What's the best way to do that?
Tony, you're kind. Reach out on socials. It's easy to find me on socials, and I'm sure we can get the contact information up there again. But again, please feel free to reach out. I welcome these conversations to continue. Check out my website at robynhd.ca. And again, we'll make sure that's available. And I'm so honored to have been here at your conference. Take good care, everyone. Bye for now.